Did you know there's a flight sim yoke on Amazon for just $160? But the real question is cheap actually worth it? Or are you better off just avoiding anything in this price range? To make things even more interesting, this yoke comes with a health warning. And yet, despite all of the red flags, it somehow managed to surprise me. Unboxing it felt predictable. No fancy padding, no real protection, just some cardboard dividers. It's what you'd expect at this kind of price point. Inside the box, you'll find the yoke handle already attached to the base, and two desk mounts which have a flaw that you'll want to know about. So let's talk about what it's actually like and what it does. The roll movement is smooth but limited to 45 degrees. But putting aside the limited range, the smoothness of the actual movement was a pleasant surprise. Even over the centre part it feels great, far better than I'd expected. Pitch travel gives you about 44mm, which is less than mid-range or pro-grade yokes. Again, for context, the honeycomb comes in around 80 to 90mm, and my Brunner on the main sim rig is about 160. But for $160, that 40 to 50mm of linear throw is fine. Again, the movement on the pitch axis is smooth, there's no sticking, and the resistance feels just about where you'd want it. Keep in mind, this is a new yoke with only 3 to 4 hours of use. However, I do wonder about the longevity. If you already own one of these, let us know in the comments of how it's held up over time. Moving on to the buttons and the switches, you get 4 push buttons, 2 flip style switches, which don't really flip, and 2 rocker switches with almost no tactile feedback. There's also an 8-way POV switch. It's nothing special, but it does the job. Overall, the buttons do feel cheap, but at this price, they're functional, and that's what counts. The throttle, prop, and mixture levers are in the right place. They feel decent, and are a good size. My only gripe is they're not colour-coded like the high-end models. Even at this price point, I'd love to see black, red and blue levers. One thing I picked up on the model that I have here is the mixture control feels a little bit rough and inconsistent compared to the other two. Now, this might just be my model. So if you have one of these and you have the same experience or a different experience, let me know in the comments. The yoke is designed to be desk mounted. The included clamps, which I have here, included clamps are secure when mounted to a desk, but you need a desk that's at least 25mm thick for a proper fit. Anything less than that and it's just going to rock around a little bit, and I do think that's a bit of a miss. Moving on to the build quality, look, it's okay, it's not great, it's not terrible, just what you'd expect for $160. The materials are all plastic, but the yoke does hold up during use. Surprisingly, there's no squeaks or creaking, and the yoke in use is really quite quiet. Might have already mentioned this in the video, but you can see where I've got it mounted here. It's fairly solid. In fact, it's even moving the desk. Alright, so we'll try out the throttle and the mixture and prop levers. Everything seems to be fine. Like I'm looking at it on the gauge inside the Cessna. I mean, it's pretty good, just what you'd expect. We need to disable parking brakes, and that's one of the flip switches. I think that sounds like it's the flaps. Let's just go external. Yeah. So this inside flip switch is what they call it, is your flaps up and down, and pushing down on the other switch is parking brakes. So I think I've released that parking brake. Let's go full flaps. Bit of power. And I have got this set to auto rudder, just because I've got no rudders under the desk, and that's certainly a way that you could fly with the yoke like this. You do not need a rudder. Let's just try and trim this aircraft out first. And the trim switches work. Obviously aileron trim there as well, and your POV switches work quite well. As smooth as both axes are, and they're really smooth, this really is quite surprising. It does feel overly sensitive on the elevator. It does, there's no way around that. That may take some getting used to. It doesn't feel so bad on the roll axis, although I'm always going to want that 90 degrees. There's nothing that will change my mind there. I do feel like it should have 90 degrees of roll in the yoke. It's just shy of mind-blowing how cheap this little unit is against the way it actually feels. It's definitely punching way above its weight. In terms of just the smoothness, there's hardly any detent through the middle portion of both pitch and roll. The throttles are, I think, in a good place. You know, you can easily have your hand rested over the side or the top of the yoke and controlling the yoke with just your fingers on your left hand. The throttle seems really responsive. The yoke mounting system itself is actually pretty solid. Any shake here that you might see is actually the full desk that's moving. So I do think anybody without a set of rudders, if you want to fly Flight Simulator with an auto rudder, which is absolutely fine if you're starting out, you know, you've got your throttle controls, you've got your basics like your park and brake, your flaps, you've got your trim switches which work really well, your POV, all the basics are there. But again, I'll stress, what surprised me the most is not the buttons, it's not the build quality, because you know, that kind of matches the price. It's the actual feeling of the pitch and the roll axis. But quite an impressive bit of kit for the price. Here's the curveball. If you scroll down on the Amazon product page, you'll actually find a health warning. Apparently this yoke may contain chemicals like carbon black, which the state of California says could cause cancer or reproductive harm. Is this serious? Honestly, I don't know. Let me know your thoughts about this in the comments. So moving on to the pros and the cons. So the pros would be the affordability. It's 25% cheaper than the nearest competitor with more features. It's also plug and play, smooth pitch and roll, which again is unexpected in something at this price point. The built-in throttle and prop and mixture levers are pretty good. Then the cons would be the fact that there's no 90-degree roll axis, and the desk mounts need a desk at least 25mm thick for a sturdy connection. So who could this yoke be for? It's great for flight sim beginners looking for an affordable plug-and-play experience. It's also ideal for GA pilots or casual simmers who don't need pro-level gear. If you're unsure about diving into flight simulation, this is also a great way to, I'd say, test the waters without breaking the bank. I had low expectations for this yoke, like really low, but it exceeded them in some surprising ways. The smooth pitch and roll, even with the limited range, are much better than I anticipated. If you're on a budget or just getting started, this is a great way to dip your toe into flight sim. It's not perfect, but it does give you a taste of what's possible without committing to an expensive setup. And trust me, flight simming can get expensive fast. For $160, the CH Flight Yoke does enough to get you started. It has all the buttons you need for trimming, parking brakes, flaps, and of course your mini throttles. If you can look past the limited 45 degrees of roll axis, then you'll enjoy a fairly smooth experience at a really good price, and that's a win in my book.